I'm Niresh. During the last general election, just a few weeks ago, just one out of Sri Lanka's 22 electoral districts was not won by the NPP. What is that district? Which one is it? It was Baticaloa. And to discuss how that happened and the explanations behind it, we have with us a very popular young MP, Mr. Shanakiyan Rasamanickam, no stranger to the public, of course, and to our programs. Welcome, Shanakiyan.
Thank you, Niresh.
So, tell the viewers how this was done. What was behind it? What is different about the Baticaloa voters that convinced them to vote for your party, the ITAC, rather than go with the flow of the rest of the country, which pretty much voted for the NPP?
Thank you, Niresh. Thank you for having me on Face to Face. It's always good to see you and discuss current affairs.
Good to have you.
Thank you. Well, in terms of the electoral victory, it was quite satisfying. A lot of our hard work in the last 4 years and honest work was accepted by the people, and people, appreciated it, and that's why we were able to win in Baticaloa. It's a combination of reasons. I wouldn't narrow it down to singling on one specific reason on why Baticaloa we could withstand the NPP tsunami. I would say was I think we stood by the people at all times, and we were involved. In fact, it was just myself in Baticaloa for my party. Even though we won 3 seats this time, we only had one MP, that was myself. So, I mean, a lot of the work and the responsibilities were on my shoulders. But I think being with the people and actually doing what's right by the people that's one of the main reasons why we were able to win the district. Because I think the change that people wanted to see in the country, they were able to relate to that change by voting for me and my party in the district of Baticaloa.
So are you saying that Baticaloa was in fact ahead of the rest of the country in that certain changes, the system change had already begun there, that the people had confidence in you and your colleagues? Because after all, you went from 1 seat in 2020 to 3 seats this time from Baticaloa, and you personally went, I think you had 33,000 votes back in 2020, and this time you have 65,000 votes. That's so obviously there's something different about Baticaloa, or to put it in a better frame perhaps, there's something different about your party's work in Baticaloa.
Like I just mentioned, I think the people could relate to myself and, a party in terms of Baticaloa. They could relate to what they were seeing in the other, parts of the country where what NPP was promising. So for one thing, corruption. I always stood up against corruption. I was not corrupt. When a lot of the MPs in the north and the east were accused of getting bar permits, if you look at the bar permits list that was very recently formally published by the NPP, only 1 bar permit in the district of Baticaloa was issued, whereas in Kilnochchi there were 18, and Baticaloa's population of 449,000, only 1 bar permit was issued. Even that, there were about 8 permits issued, and we protested for an extended period of time with the public to get rid of those bar permits. I mean, bar permits being issued for developing tourism is one thing, but these bar permits that were issued in the north and the east were not aimed towards tourists. They were aimed more towards locals there, because we hardly get any tourists there because of the poor infrastructure in terms of transport. So, so things like that. And also we had the likes of Pillayan, Vyalendran and Jana, who also directly accused of a lot of malpractices and corrupt deals and etc. So I think our party and myself having stood up for that, so they could, by voting for us also, or voting for me in Baticaloa, they didn't have to choose NPP to, fight corruption. They knew that they felt confident enough to put their trust in me to do the right thing for another term. So I think I must thank the people of Baticaloa for putting the trust in me. And also, it was it's the highest number of preferential votes that anybody has ever gotten in the district of Baticaloa. So out of the, since this system has existed for the last 30-40 years, the previous high was somewhere around 53,000. So 65,000 was the highest preferential vote. And also the person right after me, the person who was second on the list, was 21,000. So I had a, about
huge margin there.
So I think that is just a trust that the people put in myself and the party to do the right thing in Baticaloa.
And to put this election victory for your party in context, Shanakiyan, it wasn't even close in Baticaloa. Basically, your party, ITAC, had 96,000, nearly 97,000 votes, which was just a shade under 34%. And the second highest was NPP, which had 55,000, or about 19%. So there's a huge difference. And of course, there was a lot of choice made, a lot of choices for the voters, and the voters made their choices, because you have in third place, I think, SLMC with 40,000, TMVP with 31,000, and SJB with 22,000. So a lot of parties did contest. It was a vibrant exercise in democracy, wouldn't you say?
For sure. I think this time we had a large number of parties, because even ITAC faced an election on its own. Formerly, we used to be the Tamil National Alliance, which had 3 other parties, but this time ITAC contested on its own. So there were more people who were, more parties like the DTNA, the guys who went for the presidential election under the Consimple, then the TULF, then there were some independent groups. So, this election was very, was a very competitive election. So, again, I would just single it down to that people put their trust in us because of our actions in the last 4 years. So, I think now we have a huge responsibility to ensure that the people of Baticaloa are not in any way politically, marginalized because they didn't vote for the NPP. So, which I don't think the NPP should do. But we have to do our absolute best for the people of Baticaloa. Not just for the people of Baticaloa, but for the entire country, but especially for the people of Baticaloa for putting their trust in me.
Now, you also won 3, of the 4 electorates. That is, you have the postal vote, which you won, and Kalkuda and Padirippu, both of those that you won. But the Baticaloa town electorate itself went to the NPP. Do you see any reason for that, or is it just the vagaries of democracy?
I think the main reason for that was both of NPP's, the NPP's preferential list, the number 1 and the number 2, both from the Baticaloa electorate. So I think NPP also had a system where, I don't know, this is what I'm being told, that they already decided on who they want to see in Parliament. So they, how when they gave, when they fielded candidates in certain electorates where, where the competition is, this is some NPP thing, this is what I heard. So I think both the person who was on the first on the list and the second on the list were both from the Baticaloa electorate. And also, Baticaloa electorate is not only Tamil voters, it's got Tamil and Muslim voters, because you have Kathankudi and Eraur also in the Baticaloa electorate. So, because I think the MP who got elected from the NPP, even though the NPP got 55,000 votes, I think the preferential votes were around 15,000. So, so the voters, the votes that were collected.
So the voters voted more for the party rather than for the individual.
I don't know how the preferential voting system, happened in within NPP. But I think the reason for that is, I think from what I was told, that NPP had preferred a candidate who was from Kathankudi to be the MP as opposed to the one who won. So I think they must have concentrated their efforts in that electorate to ensure that he comes up first on the national list. So I mean, there is no other specific reason as to why. One of the main reasons is that the particular electorate has both Tamil and Muslim voters. So our party gets very few Muslim votes because we don't field Muslim candidates.
Right. Now, your party had a meeting with President AKD last week, I believe. What was that about? What was discussed? Anything that came of it?
Well, generally, post-presidential election or post-parliament election, the newly elected president generally invites the Tamil party. So we are the third largest party in the parliament, and we don't represent the main opposition leaders party. So we are identified as the third largest party. So our objectives are different to the main opposition party. So generally it's other than Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Gotabaya didn't invite us for 2 years, didn't want to meet us, but presidents generally invite. But this particular meeting, I was told that our Jaffna district MP Kilnochchi district MP Sridharan had requested for a meeting to meet with the president, and later I found out that meeting was more so to be discussed about the flood situation and the disaster. But our parliamentary group decided that we cannot, as the Tamil people's primary or the main political party that has representation in all districts, we can't only talk to President about the flood situation in our first meeting. So our issues that a lot of people ask what issues we have that the Sinhala people don't have, but there are some issues like that. So mostly the issues of the political prisoners, the missing persons issue, land issues, new constitution, when it will come, and some discussions around that. And we have very specific land issues with various government departments like the archaeology department, the wildlife, the forest, the Mahavali authority. So discussions were around on these lines, and so it was a first initial discussion, and the president wanted some more time to engage with us on these issues.
Now, Shanakiyan, your party has had such discussions on all these issues
since 1949.
Exactly. Perhaps not on missing persons, but on all these other issues, land, the constitution, and so on. Any reason to believe that this time it'll be different? Is it more promising this time?
Well, for the first time in the history, I would say as well, a party that is not, that other than the ITAC, has been able to win districts of Jaffna, Vanni, and Trinco. I mean, Trinco and Ampara, the demography has been systematically changed now that the Trinco's electoral victory of NPP and Ampara Digamadulas is because the demography has changed. If the state-sponsored colonization has happened for 70 plus years, now it's if that they are not Tamil speaking majority districts anymore. See, they're Tamil speaking, but the demography has changed. So because of even then, NPP has still won. I can't take anything away from NPP's victory in these districts. So I think personally that President Anurakumara Dissanayake also has more responsibility now to actually resolve these issues, as opposed to ITAC or our party putting these requests forward. People have voted for him in those districts as well.
So what you're saying is that the NPP MPs of those districts in the northeast certainly have to push these issues forward now?
Well, they will also have to. I don't know how much of space they'll have to push within the NPP. These MPs, even though they're MPs, I don't know how much power they will have or how much their voices will be heard on.
But on the other hand, they represent the people. They don't represent the NPP anymore. They are now members of Parliament, drawing salaries from the public, and they are accountable to the public. So, that's the democratic theory. Once you become an elected official, you're supposed to then focus on your responsibilities, your duties to the people rather than to your party. Of course, you have that affiliation, but your primary duty has to be to the public.
So, Naresh, we'll have to wait and see it's too early. We've only had 1 week of Parliament so far. So, it's too early to comment on how they would, if they would represent the party or the people. Something that we will have to wait and see. It's unfair to come to a conclusion right now. But I think on the issues that we discussed, I think we will have a responsibility. The responsibility will be on us to push these issues. But President Andra Kumara Dissanayake also has an added responsibility this time because the people of the North and East have also voted for him. So as opposed to previous presidents, now these issues that we speak about, President is also aware of these issues. So, and also I think President's party has a 2/3 majority without crossovers, and it's not just slightly above 150, as 159, and they're all from one party. They're all under one whip. So
it's not a coalition.
It's not a coalition. If compared to previous governments, I think when Gotabaya Rajapaksa got 2/3, it was all crossovers from different alliances and parties, and within the SLPP they had
a lot of horse deals.
They had the likes of Vimal Weerawansa was one group, SLFP was one group. So, but even previous times in 2015 under the Good Governance government, it was SLFP and the UMP together. So SLFP would blame the UMP for saying they weren't keen. UMP would blame the SLFP, and even in 2010 under Mahinda Rajapaksa's government, when they had crossovers, that's how they got the 2/3. So this time there is reason to believe that there is reason to believe that there are no excuses to be given, unless if nothing's done this time. It's very clear that it's the president and the NPP didn't want to do it, that there was no political will to do it, because there is no other excuses to not do it, not resolve these issues. So we are hopeful. We are not being we've done our part. We met the president, told him all these issues, and president, unlike Gotabaya Rajapaksa, is not an amateur in politics. He has been in politics for so long. He has been involved in constitutional making processes in the past. He is very much aware of the issues of missing persons, and also even in his manifesto, he even very clearly they said that they will take forward the 2015 constitutional making process. Take it forward. So, taking all that into consideration, we have no reason to believe that, no reason to be hopeful about things being resolved. But I think we must not put these off for too long. These things, if they are serious about getting these things done, they should get it done in the first year, because obviously the expectations on the government is also sky high, because a lot of votes, lot of support means a lot of expectations as well. So the huge expectations. Now we can already see certain issues that have come up where certain sections of the voters are already questioning some of the decisions of the government. So a lot of questions are being asked. So as we let more time, more and more time pass, there'll be more questions. So
Shanakiyan, how do you see the performance of the NPP government so far? Of course, it's early days, but as a key person in the opposition and one who has been there for a few years as well, this is your second term. How do you see their performance so far?
Well, right now, politicians who even state facts and if they are seen to be facts that are against the government, the public generally feel that it's unfair by us to criticize the government. These are not criticism,
but
these
that's the role of opposition members of parliament.
True, but I think these are more than criticism. I would say that these are some things that I've observed. Let me put it that way. Now, the disaster that happened, the
flood situation,
the Fenga cyclone. Now it's called Fenga, I think.
Fenga, yes.
You know, about a week before itself, we knew the Fenga was going to pass through the east coast of Sri Lanka, and you know the weather forecasts were going to be heavy rain, not only in the eastern province but heavy rain across the country. So clearly, we all knew that the floodgates were going to open up. It's more than the rainfall, it's the tanks will reach spill level, and then when the tanks reach spill level, the low-lying areas of the country, places like Baticaloa, which is surrounded by lagoons, that the flooding is going to happen was something that we all knew. So, in terms of the government, since there are no ministers from that area, there are no cabinet ministers. I think there's a deputy minister. Since there were the provincial council is not functional, since there's no chief minister, since the local government bodies are all dissolved, everything that's managed by the provincial council was completely, the governor was responsible. So even though we are members of parliament, we have no affiliation with the provincial council. We can unofficially speak to them, but we don't have the authority to get involved in the affairs of the provincial council. So we don't.
So would you say that this cyclone, which was not a very powerful one, it was the lowest category of the cyclones, because there are 5 categories in the Indian Ocean, and this was the lowest one. Of course, it did dump a lot of rain, but as a disaster, we've faced much worse disasters. And are you of the view that the lack of provincial councils and local government authorities was laid bare in this disaster response?
Lack of having elected officials there is also one thing, but I think the preparedness for that, or the inexperience, came out. Because we knew which areas were going to get flooded, so we should have had a disaster management coordinating meeting a week prior, where the Navy should have come. The governor should have, if there's nobody, the governor should have chaired it. The divisional secretary should have been given clear instructions on how to, because there was an instance at around 11 o'clock in the night, somebody called me and about a snake bite. The doctor called me and said somebody with a snake bite was there, and because the transportation was completely cut off. Because of the floods, there's no road, so only way to access the hospital was with a boat. So I should thank the commander of the Navy. I called him at 11 o'clock, he picked up, and then he arranged a boat at 11 o'clock to go pick up that patient. We were able to save that person's life. But see, it shouldn't have come to that. We should have had, hospitals should have had a boat on standby, in coordination with the Navy. But later we figured out that the Navy was not given instructions to do, because it's the inexperience of the government. So that is one thing. It's one of the first things that I had to face after getting elected as MP, after the presidential election. And also I think now this rice shortage, there is, it should have been foreseen. It's not something that,
but there's no real shortage. We have had the harvest has been sufficient according to the statistics. So this seems more of a artificially created shortage, which should have perhaps been dealt with better.
Well, we've had instances in the past where this has happened as well, and that government's action and this government actions are no different. It's to urgently import rice from overseas, as opposed to because we saw footage of Consumer Affairs Authority officials being schooled by mill owners. Consumer Affairs Authority, it's almost like they were on a educational excursion to a rice mill to understand how the milling and the mill owners were able to dictate the terms. So I mean, I to be honest, I don't know. I'm only going by what the media has reported, because even though we are members of parliament, we don't have access to government's information, whatever that they have. I mean, we can question that in parliament and ask them to give us the information. But right now, I don't have it, but if the previous governments and this government, there's no real difference between how they've handled a shortage, or if you, from what you said, if it looks like an artificially created shortage to create a black market, then this has happened in the past. This is no different to the sugar scam or the different scams that we've had. Now there's going to be a lot of questions asked about this rice that's being imported. Have they followed due procedure? Were their tender procedures followed? Who is importing this rice? Importers are being allowed to import rice. Are they being sold at the right price? So these questions will come up in the upcoming days. So along with that also, about the government's performance, in terms of corruption, in terms of electricity tariff reduction, in terms of the fuel, why I said that a lot of expectations from this government is because of the promises, pre-election promises that they gave.
They set some very high expectations for themselves.
Well, for the public. For themselves is now they've got 2/3, they've got, the presidency. So, but the public, it's, fuel prices the diesel price was increased by 3 rupees and the petrol was reduced by 2 rupees. Kerosene was increased by 5 rupees. So, fluctuations in the world market, all that is true. That is what every government has said, that they can't just reduce the fuel price then and then, or even the tender procedures about fuel procurement. From what I've learned, it's the same company that procured fuel previously that's procuring now. So if they accuse them of corruption in the past, how are they using the same company? So these are all questions that we will all have to wait and see to receive answers. But how much time do they need? They need to give us a deadline. We can't also give them time, indefinitely to say
the clock is ticking.
Well, yeah, and they need to say, okay, we need this amount of time to figure out how to do this. So, our objective is not to weaken the government or attack the government or try to disrupt proceedings or to create chaos. I don't think Sri Lanka can deal with another economic crisis or a political crisis or a political turmoil. I think this country needs stability, and we want to support the government in any possible way to create stability, but we need to know some concrete answers for a lot of the questions that we have.
We are in conversation with Parliamentarian Shanakiyan Rasamanickam. We'll take a short commercial break right now. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
A trusted place for your fixed deposit. Valuable FD, a symbol of stability.
Step away from the conventional art of storytelling. Get ready for the Newsfirst Breakfast Rundown with me, Zulfikar Farzan.
Welcome back to Face to Face. We're in conversation with Shanakiyan Rasamanickam, MP representing the Baticaloa district. Now, Shanakiyan, what about the local government elections which are now coming up? We are expecting them in the next few months, and the government has started taking some concrete steps towards preparations in that respect. But what about your party and you in particular in the Baticaloa district?
Well, Naresh, I think we first need some clarity on when the elections may happen. But it's the election commission that has to call for elections. It's not the government. But I think there is a court decision to hold the local government elections ASAP because
the Supreme Court ruling.
Supreme Court ruling based on the previous government not holding the elections, saying that was illegal and to hold them immediately. So ideally not in terms of what the public want, but according to that Supreme Court's decision, it should happen in the first 2 months of the year, because you just had an election. But it's the election commission that needs to announce the dates. But before that, I think there needs to be some clarity on if it's going to be the same nominations, because some of the people who, some of the people who were to contest have died now. Some people have migrated.
It's been a long time, more than 2 years, about 2 years since the nomination. We were supposed to have the election in March 2023.
Yeah.
So we're talking 2 years.
Yeah. So, and some people have migrated, people have crossed over to other parties.
And some of those alliances are no more.
Correct. So, but I don't know how we need to know how it's going to happen. I mean, at least if we can at least change the names of those who have deceased and, make a few changes without having to file new nominations, also okay, as long as there's some room to make a little few amendments, because the nomination process also, we paid the money and, all that is been there with the returning officer. We don't know where that money goes. So that is one thing. Also, the government will say that they need money. So I think the vote on account that was passed, I didn't see specifically a large allocation for the ministry or the election commission to hold these elections either. So the actual budget will only happen, I think, in March or April. So I don't know if it will happen before April or after April. So that is something that we will have to, get a response from the government on. And also the provincial councils. So the provincial councils also need to be held.
That's been a sticking point for many years.
The last time a provincial council election was held, was provincial council. All the provincial councils have not been functional since 2019. I think the Ua province was the last provincial council.
That's correct.
So no provincial council elections in since 2015, I think. So elections have been overdue for almost a decade in the district in Eastern Province. Was supposed to happen in 2017. So we had we saw Tilvin Silva. The media had reported that Tilvin Silva said that the provincial council system will be abolished, but then the president said otherwise, that he will hold the provincial council elections after mid next year. But to do that, there has to be an amendment made to the provincial council's bill. So if the government is keen on holding the provincial council as promised in 2026 after the mid part, then they need to get to work to get that bill amended now. That's to make sure that the provincial councils are, the election, the system, the glitch in the law is fixed. So these are things that, again, time is what they need to, what we'll be told, that they'll need time to let us know on what happens. So we'll have to wait and see.
Now, with regard to the provincial councils, you also have the related issue of the 13th Amendment. And here we have India has certain interests as well. Now, the president is about to depart on a visit to India. Do you expect any developments there?
Well, India has always said, even in joint statements or even in their communiques that the 13th Amendment must be strengthened and power sharing and power devolution must be strengthened in the country. India's interest in that matter is that the provincial council came into existence through the Indo-Lanka Accord. So it's part of India's foreign policy as well. And so the government of Sri Lanka agreed. It's an agreement between two governments. So they can't, even though the government of today's day is different, they can't just get rid of something.
It's the government of Sri Lanka which signed it.
Correct. So I think, I'm sure there'll be some mention. I'm hoping that there'll be some mention of the provincial council election, so that India stresses on the importance of upholding democracy by holding provincial council elections. And also, the provincial council elections is one thing, and even the powers given to the provincial council under the 13th Amendment have been taken back by the central government. So those sort of things also need to be revisited. But overall, I think, the new constitution making process is also very important. So I think I am hoping that the government doesn't put it off for too long and that it gets it done within a year. Abolishing of executive presidency was one of those key promises in the manifesto. So I think the public will have to hold the government accountable to some of these promises.
What about the executive presidency? Now, in the past, we've had many parties which promised to do so. I think President Chandrika, back in 1994, she ran on that. That was one of the cornerstones of her campaign. And to her credit, she did try, but she certainly didn't have anything close to the 2/3 majority. But since then, we have had so many presidents, all making promises, but nothing concrete has ever been done. Are you hopeful about this government abolishing the executive presidency?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, every other government that came and had the 2/3 to abolish it, Chandrika had a very slim majority, I think, to even pass.
Just one or two seats majority.
Yeah. But this is the first government that will not have an excuse to have not done it. So I'm hoping that they will do what they've promised.
Interesting indeed. But of course, constitution making is an elaborate, complex process. You can't just rewrite a constitution in a few months. So that might take a couple of years, don't you think?
Not necessarily, because based on the election manifesto, very clearly said that they will take forward the constitution making process of 2015 and 2017, that period, which they were part of it as well. So there is a draft that is ready. Public consultations were done, and this was done with the consensus of the NPP government or NPP members at the time. So I don't think they need to start from scratch. They already have a draft. So that they need to pick it up and take it forward. So it shouldn't take that long. If they want to do it, they can do it even in 6 months.
Now, Shanakiyan, you mentioned earlier on today that there needs to be more infrastructure development in the Baticaloa district and also throughout the east. Now, the north and east constitute much of Sri Lanka's coastline. I think about 70% of our coastline is in the north and east, so a lot of the beaches and the fisheries and so on. Exactly what type of infrastructure development are you talking about?
I think that 2/3 of the coastal line of the country is in the north and the east. So, first of all, the fisheries sector, I think we have about under 5 fisheries harbors in the entire north and the east. Even small sized fisheries harbors. So, but in the south we have much more than that. So, developing fisheries harbors that's one infrastructure that is not what I mentioned earlier. I mentioned infrastructure for tourists to come in. I think the transportation system, it takes 8 hours to get to Jaffna. It takes 8 hours to go to Baticaloa from Colombo by road, even and by train. The Jaffna, the Northern Railway line, thanks to India, the tracks were upgraded from because there's no tracks due to the war. But I think from Anuradhapura to Vavuniya, they're still working on it. But in terms of Baticaloa, it's the British, whatever tracks that the British have just been, few repairs have been done. Unfortunately, the highway was built to Hambantota. The speed train line was also put to Beliatta. The airport was, I don't know if I mentioned the airport. The airport was to Hambantota. The harbour was to Hambantota. So I think the distribution of resources was unjust, in that government's period. But
certainly goes without saying. I think that's public knowledge.
Sure, and the Jaffna airport also needs to be upgraded so that larger flights can come in. And there are various even about the run for the runway to be expanded. They said they need more land, and the public were willing to give up land. And even in Baticaloa, we need to have more. We have no even domestic flights to Baticaloa. So tourists who would come to Sri Lanka wouldn't want to spend 8 hours in a car just to come visit Baticaloa or to visit Jaffna unless they actually have
So relatives or friends living there.
That will be
like
mostly diaspora, expats or Tamil Sri Lankans who come on holiday. There will be local tourists. But to actually attract, the tourists who could actually come and improve, the
local economy.
You need the Western tourists or even the Chinese or the Indians or anybody. The amount of time spent on travel is what I meant by saying infrastructure. So the previous government gave liquor licenses saying to develop tourism where we don't even have. I even said in Parliament that I was only Suddha in Baticaloa, that we see in Baticaloa, so some time back. Because we don't get a lot of tourists coming to those areas. So Pasikuda Pasikuda runs mostly on group tours that come, but they come and stay at the resort. So most of the resorts are owned by multinational, corporates. So the local economy does not benefit out of any of these tourists that come. I mean, I saw the tourist numbers have increased considerably, but
those numbers are mainly in other areas of the country.
For sure.
It's not,
for sure. Nothing.
Not,
Arugambe is,
yes.
Arugambe has always said, but the type of tourists that visit Arugambe are mostly the backpackers and, the people in hostels. And the Arugambe's local economy also, I mean, we get most of the people who run hostels and hotels in Arugambe from Hikkaduwa. It's not people from Arugambe who actually benefit from the, even from the tuk-tuk drivers to all of them come from Hikkaduwa for the season. And then they go back to Hikkaduwa. So, I mean, I'm not saying that that they shouldn't come or whatever, but I'm saying the local economy to fight to for the livelihood of the people, there's very little that has been done. So I think the infrastructure that we need to improve is transportation. Very clearly, if we can at least find a mechanism where domestic flights can operate, or if the highway can be expanded, or if there are different things that can be done, but those really need to be looked at.
And until such infrastructure is built up, you're not going to get heavy industries coming into Baticaloa district at all, are you?
For sure. I think previous government's proposals to create land connectivity with India, completely would have transformed the economy of the entire country. You have, but I don't know if the new government is going to go ahead with it. But I think they should, because that will, open this country up to, population of 1 billion, people who could just, and all these threats, discussions about national security, all those were like a boogeyman that was created by certain individuals. But I think we need to look at some, large scale infrastructure projects like that to uplift the lives of the people in the north and east.
Now, this sort of connectivity within regions, we see it, of course, in Europe, we see it in North America, in Southeast Asia, but among the SAARC countries, and especially Sri Lanka and India, this has lagged behind in quite a way. And of course, we had the excuse that the war was going on, so nothing could be done, and so on. But it's been a long time since the war ended, and we haven't seen any significant development in this integration, economic integration with South India.
Well, we'll see what this government's foreign policy is going to be on those sort of things. Even though we understand that it's important, unfortunately, we are not the ones in power. So we'll have to wait and see. And I mean, connectivity is just, connectivity is what creates or, helps economies do well. So I don't understand why anybody would think of it as a bad thing. In this,
except for political reasons.
Well, in this new modern day and age, I think some of this rhetoric about India will take over Sri Lanka, all that is just it's just absolute garbage. So we should look at what's best for this country's future and the citizens, future of this country's citizens. So let's wait and see.
So would you say this government is a decisive phase for Sri Lanka as a whole? Because not just to get us out of the bankruptcy situation, but to take us forward to make that system change, which Sri Lankans need?
Well, absolutely, because I don't think if this government fails as well, that it will be very hard to build up the trust of the public again to get another government elected to do the same things. We've already had brain drain happen. Large numbers of people have migrated out of the country. The USD, the LKR versus USD has really fallen. We were at 180 something when Gota came into power. We are at now 300 something or just under 300. So I don't think, if this government, public have done everything that they need to do that's within their power for a system change. Now it's the government's, responsibility and the government's job to deliver. See, there were all these discussions about how MPs' privileges will be curtailed. Nothing has been curtailed as far as I know. And I mean, there are no real privileges given. And all up travel allowance, everything put together, MPs get around 300,000. That too depends on where they come from, because they calculate how much fuel each MP must get based on the distance from the district to the parliament. So in terms of my district, I have to travel 353 kilometers one way to get to parliament and 353 back. So that's all they provide for fuel, the number of kilometers. So all that put together, I think it comes around 300, all put together is around 300,000 or 350,000 maximum. So
that's not going to make a huge impact.
And I don't think even that is going to be changed. Yeah. And there was all this talk about food in parliament being changed. I mean, I barely eat at parliament. I mean, I eat at parliament. Most MPs, in the previous time, eat at parliament. It's a matter of convenience. If you have parliament sessions and you're there during lunchtime, if you're hungry and there's lunchtime, you go eat. It's not like we MPs would go to parliament to have lunch, you see, but the same meals are still being provided in parliament. So I think this entire vehicles being brought to Colombo and being paraded. Now, where are those vehicles? We've been told that some ministers, some deputy ministers are using those vehicles, or secretaries. So I don't think the public will be satisfied with some media, stunts. It's okay for the first month or so. Now that they've gotten absolute power with 2/3, they will have to deliver on, and we would like to support them. Given corruption, all this Rajapaksha stolen money, corruption. Even we haven't seen
any concrete steps being taken to investigate those.
Even with the Easter Sunday attacks, we saw Pillian was summoned to the CID and was questioned, and there's these sort of things Naresh will have to really because if this government
to be more than just a show.
I'm not saying that the government's putting on a show. It's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that what they've done in the last 3 months, if that's what they plan to do in the future as well, the public will not be happy. And why I say that is because if this is the decisive time for Sri Lanka, it is, because the public have done everything. They got on the streets to overthrow Rajapakshas. Unfortunately, President Ranil Wickremesinghe came and sat on the chair and really the public couldn't do anything. The first given opportunity to show their displeasure, they, got rid of the ones that they didn't want in parliament. They've given the government a strong, they've given a mandate to a strong government. So if this government also doesn't do what, the public expect, I don't think the public trust can be ever, won by any other party for a long, long time.
Now, Shanakiyan, what's it like to be in a parliament where the opposition is such a minority? Never had this kind of majority before. 159 from one party, and then you have all the other parties with just a few. The SJB has 40, obviously. But what's it like when you sit there and you have this overwhelming majority on the other side?
Well, I think last government also, they had 153. So it's only 6 more. So it's not like a huge difference. I think quota at the height of, I think the 20th Amendment, when he passed it, I think he got 153 or 150 votes. So that's 5 or 6 less than. The only difference is that this time it's all from one party as opposed to crossovers and buyovers and sellouts and all that. So I think it's it's very similar to how it was when I first entered Parliament in 2020. It's not that much of a difference.
So we continue to have a vibrant opposition.
Well, I hope so. Well, I will do my best, as an opposition MP, to be critical but also constructive. Again, it's to make sure that the government is pushed in the right direction to deliver things that they've promised.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have tonight. My thanks to Shanakiyan Rasamanickam, MP from the Baticaloa district. Thank you very much for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Niresh, and thank you to all the audience for very patiently listening to our discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you to our viewers for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a good evening.